I got a message from my future self. And it warned me. Yesterday evening, I received an anonymous message. Don't go to the meeting tomorrow. You have no idea what's waiting for you. I stared at my phone, confused. Was this some kind of joke? The wording, the punctuation, it felt eerily familiar. Like I had written it myself. This morning, curiosity got the better of me. I tried tracing the number, running it through a few search tools. Nothing. It wasn't registered to anyone. I dismissed it as a prank until I got another message. Please, listen to me. If you go, everything will change. And not for the better. Okay, now I was officially unsettled. I tried calling the number. Straight to an error message, this number does not exist. Then, tonight, something even stranger happened. While cleaning up some files on my laptop, I stumbled upon an old backup of my phone. I had no memory of ever making it, but curiosity made me dig through it. That's when I found the audio file. It was labeled simply, "Don't go." I clicked play. It was my voice. Me. If you're hearing this, it means you still have a choice. Don't go. Otherwise. The recording cut off. A chill ran down my spine. I live in Chicago, and tomorrow at 7 p.m., I'm supposed to meet up with Eric, an old friend I haven't seen in 3 years. The plan was to grab coffee at the Rusty Bean, a small cafe on Lincoln Avenue. Now, I don't know what to do. This doesn't feel like a prank anymore. It feels real. Like something terrible is about to happen. I need to decide. Should I go? Chapter 1, The Decision. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard my own voice whispering, "Don't go." By morning, I had made up my mind I was going. I mean, what was the worst that could happen? Some elaborate prank? A weird coincidence? I got dressed, threw on my jacket, and stepped out into the cold February air of Chicago. The sky was a dark shade of gray, the kind that made you feel like it could snow at any moment. As I walked toward the Rusty Bean, my phone vibrated. Unknown number, you still have time to turn around. I ignored it. A few minutes later. Unknown number, you're making a mistake. I clenched my jaw. This was getting ridiculous. Finally, I reached the cafe. It was a quiet little place, warm light spilling through the windows. I spotted Eric immediately, sitting at a corner table, sipping coffee. He looked up and grinned. "Man, I thought you bailed on me." I forced a smile and sat down. Yeah, got caught up in something. For a while, everything seemed normal. We talked about work, old friends, stupid things we did in college. The messages, the voice recording, I almost convinced myself it was nothing. Then, at exactly 7:23 p.m., the door opened. A man walked in. And I froze. Because I knew him. I knew him better than I knew myself. He was me. Chapter 2, Face to Face with Myself. The man who just walked in was me. Not just someone who looked like me. It was me, same facial structure, same scar above my left eyebrow from when I fell off my bike as a kid, even the same nervous habit of clenching my jaw when I was tense. I felt my blood turn to ice. Eric, completely oblivious to what was happening, kept talking. "Dude, you good? You look like you've seen a ghost." I couldn't answer. My other self locked eyes with me across the cafe. He looked pale, his face thinner, his eyes slightly sunken, like he hadn't slept in days. He was wearing my jacket, the same one hanging in my closet at home. He moved toward my table. My hands trembled as I gripped my coffee cup. "Hey, I'll be right back," I muttered to Eric, standing up so fast I nearly knocked over my chair. I walked toward the entrance, meeting him halfway. "Sit down," he said. His voice was hoarse, lower than mine. Like he had been screaming. I hesitated, my heart pounding. "I don't have much time," he added, glancing around as if checking for someone. "We need to talk. Now." Chapter 3, The Warning. I sat down across from him at a small table near the window. My throat was dry. "Who the hell are you?" I finally managed to ask. "You already know," he said quietly. "I'm you." Or, at least, I was. I wanted to laugh, to call him crazy, but deep down, I knew he wasn't lying. I couldn't explain it, but everything about him, it felt real. "What is this? A time travel thing?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He exhaled sharply. "Something like that. But that's not important. What matters is that you were warned not to come here. And you didn't listen." I swallowed. "Why? What's going to happen?" He leaned in, lowering his voice. "Eric. You need to leave. Right now." I frowned. "What do you mean? What's wrong with Eric?" Future me looked genuinely pained, like he didn't want to say it. He glanced over my shoulder. "He's watching us. He knows something is off." I turned slightly. Eric was still sitting at our table, stirring his coffee, pretending to be casual, but his eyes flicked toward us every few seconds. Something was wrong. Very, very wrong. I turned back. "Tell me what the hell is happening." Future me clenched his jaw. His hand was trembling. "In exactly 5 minutes, he's going to ask you if you want another coffee. Say no. Then leave. Walk out that door and don't look back. Ever." I shook my head. "You're not making any sense." He grabbed my wrist so tight it hurt. His fingers were ice cold. "If you stay, you won't make it out alive." Chapter 4, The Choice. I felt like I was in a nightmare. My own self sitting in front of me, telling me to leave, warning me about my best friend. It was insane. I looked at future me, my mind racing. What happens if I stay? His expression darkened. He didn't answer. "Tell me," I demanded. But before he could, Eric stood up. "Hey, man," he said, walking over with an easy smile. "Everything good?" Future me tensed. I felt a shift in the air, a pressure that hadn't been there before. Eric put a hand on my shoulder. "Come on, let's grab another round of coffee." My treat. Time froze for a split second. Future me shook his head, eyes wide with panic. I had seconds to decide. I turned back to Eric, forcing a grin. "Actually, I think I'm good, man. I gotta head out early." His grip on my shoulder tightened. Just for a moment. Then, just as quickly, he let go, his smile not faltering. "All right, no worries." But something in his eyes changed. I grabbed my jacket and walked out of the cafe, heart hammering against my ribs. I didn't look back. Chapter 5, The Aftermath. The second I stepped outside, future me followed. "Good. You listened," he muttered. I turned to him. "What the hell just happened?" He exhaled, looking relieved but still on edge. "You don't understand yet, but you will. Eric is not who you think he is. He..." A sharp sound cracked through the night. Gunshot. We both turned. Through the cafe's window, I saw Eric, standing over the barista. Blood pooled across the counter. I couldn't breathe. Eric calmly walked toward the door, as if nothing had happened. Future me grabbed me. "Run." I didn't need to be told twice. We bolted down the street as sirens wailed in the distance. As we ran, a single thought consumed my mind. What the hell is Eric? And how did my future self know this was coming? Chapter 6, Nowhere to Hide. We ran. The cold Chicago air burned in my lungs as I sprinted down Lincoln Avenue, following my future self who, somehow, knew exactly where to go. Behind us, sirens screamed, and a distant voice shouted something over the noise. I glanced back. Eric stepped out of the rusty bean like nothing had happened. His face was calm. Unbothered. He saw us running, our eyes met, and he smiled. Not a normal smile. A slow, knowing smirk, like he expected this. Like he had been here before. I turned back forward, my heart hammering. Where are we going? I gasped. Just keep running. Future me barked. We turned down an alley, dodging piles of old cardboard boxes and dumpsters. At the end of the alley was a metal door with no sign, no markings, just there. Future me yanked it open and shoved me inside. I stumbled into darkness. He slammed the door shut behind us, bolting it. For a moment, we just stood there, panting in the silence. Then, future me grabbed me by the collar and slammed me against the wall. What the hell is wrong with you? He snapped. I shoved him back. Me? What the hell is wrong with you? What is Eric? What is happening? Future me ran a shaking hand through his hair, stepping back. He looked exhausted, his face pale, his knuckles bruised like he'd been in a fight. You weren't supposed to come tonight, he muttered. You were supposed to listen. Well, sorry, I shot back. I don't usually get mysterious texts from myself from the goddamn future. He sighed, rubbing his face. I don't have much time. I can't explain everything. But listen to me carefully, Eric is not human. I stared at him. What? Future me's jaw tightened. I know it sounds insane. But you need to believe me. He looks like Eric, talks like Eric, but he's not. And if you had stayed in that cafe any longer, you wouldn't have left alive. My stomach twisted. You mean he would have? Not just killed you, future me interrupted. Something worse. Much worse. I swallowed hard. My hands were shaking. How do you know all this? I asked quietly. Future me hesitated. Then, finally, he said. Because I stayed. Chapter 7, The First Loop. The room was dark, but I could just make out his face in the dim glow of a flickering exit sign. He looked tired, not just physically, but in a way that went deeper. You stayed? I echoed. What happened? Future me didn't answer right away. He seemed haunted. Like he was remembering something he desperately didn't want to remember. Then he spoke. I met Eric 3 years ago, just like you did. We were friends, just like you are. He was normal. Until he wasn't. The way he said it made my skin crawl. One night, we met at that cafe, future me continued. Just like tonight. But something was different. I don't know when it happened, when he changed, but the moment I looked into his eyes, I knew it wasn't him anymore. I felt a chill creep up my spine. Changed into what? Future me shook his head. I don't know. But I stayed. I let him buy me another coffee. We talked. And then. He trailed off. Then I woke up in a hospital, 3 weeks later. I felt my blood turn to ice. 3 weeks? He nodded. I don't remember what happened in between. But when I woke up, everything was wrong. He took a shaky breath. My life wasn't mine anymore. My apartment was empty, like I had never lived there. My job had no record of me. My family, they didn't recognize me. They thought I was some stranger trying to mess with them. I just stared at him. That's impossible. I thought so too, he said. But then I saw Eric again. And when he looked at me, I understood. Understood what? I whispered. Future me leaned in. His next words made my blood run cold. That I was the one who had been replaced. Chapter 8, The Truth. I took a step back. My head was spinning. No. That doesn't make any sense. Future me laughed darkly. I know. But it's the truth. You and I? We weren't supposed to make it out of that cafe. Something else was. Something else. Something that looked like us. Something that could become us. Eric wasn't the first, future me continued. And he won't be the last. I clenched my jaw. Then why am I still here? Why haven't they, whatever they are, taken me yet? Future me exhaled. Because this time, things are different. You ran. I didn't. For the first time, I saw something in his expression. Hope. I don't know why this is happening, he admitted. Why this loop keeps repeating. Why I keep reliving this nightmare, trying to warn you, only for you to make the same mistake. I swallowed hard. Then how do we stop it? Future me looked at me, his expression unreadable. You kill Eric. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. I shook my head. No. No way. I'm not murdering my best friend just because. He's not your friend anymore. Future me snapped. He's wearing Eric, but whatever's underneath isn't human. I turned away, my mind racing. This was insane. Impossible. And yet, something deep in my gut told me it was true. I took a deep breath. So what do we do now? Future me hesitated. Then he pulled something from his pocket and placed it in my hand. A key. Go to room 413 at the Grand Hotel, he said. There's someone there who can help you. I frowned. Who? Future me opened the door, glancing outside. Someone who knows what Eric really is. Someone who's been fighting them a lot longer than I have. I looked down at the key, gripping it tightly. Then I looked back up. But future me was gone. Chapter 9, Room 413. I stood alone in the alley, gripping the key so hard it dug into my palm. The Grand Hotel. Room 413. The wind howled down the empty street, carrying the distant wail of sirens. My heart was still pounding from what had just happened. Eric. Future me. The thing that was wearing my best friend. I had two choices. Go home, pretend this never happened. Or find out what the hell is going on. I looked at the key again. It felt heavier than it should. I hailed a cab. The Grand Hotel was the kind of place you wouldn't even notice unless you were looking for it. It sat between two abandoned buildings on the south side of Chicago, its neon sign half burnt out. The moment I stepped inside, the air felt wrong. Not dirty. Not haunted. Just wrong. The lobby was dimly lit, the old chandelier flickering. The man behind the front desk didn't even look up when I walked in. I swallowed my nerves and headed for the elevator. The button for the fourth floor was already lit up. I stepped inside, and the doors slid shut. The elevator groaned as it rose. Then, somewhere between the third and fourth floor, the lights flickered. The elevator stopped. My breath caught in my throat. Darkness. For 3, maybe 4 seconds, there was nothing. Just the sound of my own breathing. Then, a whisper. You're not supposed to be here. The lights snapped back on. The elevator lurched forward and the doors dinged open. I stumbled out onto the fourth floor, my heart racing. The hallway stretched in both directions, lined with identical dark wooden doors. At the very end, one stood slightly ajar. Room 413. I moved forward, every step feeling like I was walking into a trap. I pushed the door open. And froze. Inside, sitting in an armchair, staring at me like she'd been waiting a long time, was my mother. Chapter 10, The Woman Who Wasn't My Mother. My body went cold. She looked exactly like my mom. Same soft brown eyes, same tired but warm expression, the same way she always folded her hands in her lap when she was deep in thought. But there was no way it was her. My mother died 6 years ago. She tilted her head slightly. Hello, Nathan. Hearing her say my name nearly made my knees give out. I took a step back. No. No, this isn't real. She sighed. I wish that were true. I clenched my fists. What the hell is going on? Who are you?
She stood up, moving carefully like she was afraid I'd run.
Sit down. We don't have much time. I didn't move.
Her expression softened.
Nathan. I know this is hard to believe. But I need you to trust me. I let out a bitter laugh. Trust you? You look like my dead mother. You expect me to just?
Because I was your mother, she interrupted gently.
Once.
Before they took me.
My heart skipped a beat. They? She nodded. The ones that took Eric. The ones that have been watching you. I couldn't breathe.
My mother, or whatever this thing was, walked over to a small table.
On it sat a single manila folder. She slid it toward me. Open it. I hesitated. Then, with shaking fingers, I flipped it open. Inside were photos. Of me. Hundreds of them.
Different angles, different locations, my apartment, my gym, my office, even places I barely remembered going.
Some from years ago. Someone had been watching me for a long time. I flipped through more. My stomach twisted.
One photo was from tonight.
Inside the rusty bean.
A shot of me sitting at the cafe.
I swallowed hard. What is this? My mother met my eyes.
This, she said quietly, is proof that you were never supposed to leave that cafe alive.
Chapter 11, The Replacements. I sat down. My legs couldn't hold me anymore. Start talking, I said. She nodded. You're in the middle of something much bigger than you realize. Something that's been happening for decades. Maybe longer.
She sat across from me, folding her hands in her lap again, just like my mother used to.
They replace people, Nathan. My hands clenched into fists. Who does? She sighed. I don't know what they really are. I don't think anyone does. But they don't just kill people. They take their lives. Their identities. They become them. My blood ran cold. You said they took you, I whispered. If that's true, then how are you here? She gave me a sad smile. Because I never stopped fighting. Because I got lucky. And because someone helped me escape before it was too late. I swallowed. And now, I'm doing the same for you. I took a deep breath. What do they want? She hesitated. That's what I don't know. But I do know one thing: once they decide to take someone, there's no stopping them. I thought about future me. About his words. You weren't supposed to make it out of that cafe. Something clicked in my brain. You said they replace people, I said. So, what happens to the original? She held my gaze. Then she whispered. They don't survive. A chill ran down my spine. I took another look at the folder. At all the photos of me. They had already chosen me. I was next. I clenched my jaw. How do I stop this? Her expression hardened. You can't stop them. But you can kill them. She leaned forward, her voice barely a whisper. And the first one you need to kill is Eric. Chapter 12, The First Target. I stared at her. My throat was dry. You're asking me to kill my best friend. She didn't blink. No. I'm asking you to kill the thing that's wearing your best friend's skin. I shook my head. How do I even know you're telling the truth? That you're not just. She moved fast. Before I could react, she grabbed a knife from under the table and slammed it into her own palm. I jumped up, knocking over my chair. Jesus. She held up her bleeding hand. Look. I did. And my stomach dropped. The wound wasn't normal. No blood. Instead, a thick, dark liquid oozed out, almost like ink. The wound wasn't bleeding, it was closing. the skin knitting itself back together in seconds.
She flexed her fingers.
This is what they are, she said. And this is what Eric is now. My legs felt weak. I sank back into my chair. You're one of them, I whispered. She sighed. Not exactly. I was supposed to be. But something went wrong when they took me. I woke up before the process was finished. I shook my head. Process? She hesitated. I don't know how to explain it. But I wasn't fully converted. I still remember who I was. I still remember you. And that's why I'm here, to stop them from taking you, too. My hands were shaking. And you're sure Eric? He's already gone, she said softly. What you see now is not him. I swallowed. My mouth was dry. She slid something across the table toward me. A gun. Small. Black. Looked old but well maintained. Silver bullets, she said. It's the only thing that works. I stared at the gun like it was a snake. If you don't stop him, she continued, he will come for you. It's only a matter of time. I exhaled shakily. Then I picked up the gun. Chapter 13, The Hunt Begins. It was past midnight by the time I left the Grand Hotel. The streets were empty, the city quiet. But I felt watched. I checked my phone. One new message. From Eric. You shouldn't have left, man. My grip on the gun tightened. I had to find him before he found me. I thought about his apartment. He lived in a loft near downtown. That was the first place I checked. Empty. Lights off, no movement inside. His car wasn't in the lot. I checked his usual spots: an old dive bar on 9th Street, the gym we used to hit together. Nothing. Finally, I went to the last place I could think of. The Rusty Bean. It was closed. Chairs stacked on tables, lights dimmed. But something felt off. I stepped closer to the glass window, peering inside. And then I saw him. Sitting at the same table where we had met earlier. Just waiting. My stomach turned. Something about the way he sat there, completely still, staring straight ahead, it wasn't right. It wasn't human. I took a deep breath. This was it. I stepped forward and pushed open the door. Chapter 14, The Confrontation. The bell over the door jingled as I entered. Eric didn't move. The air in the cafe was stale, like the place had been abandoned for years. The overhead lights flickered. I tightened my grip on the gun, keeping it low. Eric. He finally moved, just a slow tilt of his head, his eyes locking onto mine. You shouldn't have run, he said, his voice eerily calm. My pulse pounded in my ears. Who are you? His lips curled into a smile. You already know. I swallowed, forcing myself to stay steady. Where's the real Eric? He just laughed. Slow. Amused. Like I had asked the world's dumbest question. He's gone, he said. And soon, so will you. I pulled the gun. Not tonight. He moved fast. Before I could react, he was on me, his hand gripping my throat, shoving me back against the counter. His strength was inhuman. His eyes black. You think that'll stop me, he hissed, glancing at the gun. I choked, barely able to breathe. My vision blurred. I tried to raise the weapon, but his grip was crushing me. Then. Bang. The shot rang out, deafening in the empty cafe. Eric staggered back. I gasped for air, dropping to my knees. He clutched his shoulder where I'd shot him, black liquid seeped from the wound. For the first time, he looked surprised. You, he started, but his voice was wrong now. Garbled. Like something beneath his skin was breaking apart. I scrambled to my feet. I had one chance. I raised the gun and aimed for his head. Bang. The bullet hit between his eyes.
He collapsed. The room fell silent. I stood there, panting, gun shaking in my hand.
My ears were ringing. Then, his body twitched. My breath caught in my throat.
His fingers curled.
His head snapped back up.
And he smiled. "You should have run further," he whispered.
Chapter 15, The Real Nightmare Begins. I didn't hesitate. I emptied the clip. Bang. 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 Each shot tore through his body. Black ichor splattered against the walls.
His movements became jerky, unnatural, like a glitching puppet.
Then, finally,
he stopped moving. I stood over him, my breath coming in sharp gasps. The black liquid spread across the floor, pooling beneath his twisted body.
I didn't move. Didn't breathe.
I waited for him to sit up again, for the nightmare to continue.
But he didn't. He was gone. I exhaled shakily, lowering the gun. Then I heard it. A whisper. It wasn't coming from Eric. It was coming from everywhere. The walls. The ceiling. The floor beneath my feet. One down. The cafe lights flickered. So many more to go. And that was the moment I realized. Eric wasn't the only one. Chapter 16, Not Alone.
The voice was everywhere. It slithered through the cracks in the walls, curled around me like smoke.
The whispering wasn't just a sound, it was a presence.
I took a slow step back, my breath shaky.
The cafe felt smaller now, like the walls were closing in. Then, a click. The door.
I spun around just as the lock slid shut on its own.
Trapped. A chill ran down my spine. My gun was empty. Eric was dead.
But something was still here. And it was watching me.
I looked down at Eric's body.
The black liquid had stopped spreading.
It just sat there, pooling around him like ink. Then, it moved. Not spreading. Not dripping. Shifting. Like it was alive. My stomach turned. Something rose from Eric's chest.
A dark, twisted shape, like a mass of shadow and smoke trying to form something solid.
Eyes. Not human ones. Cold. Hollow. Watching. I stepped back.
It whispered, its voice a razor slicing through the air.
You think this ends with him? I ran. Chapter 17, Nowhere is Safe. I hit the door hard, slamming into it with my shoulder. Locked. My heart pounded.
I turned just in time to see the black thing rise completely out of Eric's body, stretching, twisting, forming something wrong.
It had a mouth now. And it was grinning. I grabbed the nearest chair and threw it at the window. Smash. Glass exploded outward, shards raining onto the street.
I didn't think, I just jumped.
I landed hard on the pavement, rolling to absorb the impact.
Pain shot up my arm, but I forced myself to my feet. Inside the cafe, the thing watched me from behind the broken window.
It didn't move. It just smiled. I backed away, then turned and ran. Chapter 18, A New Target. I didn't stop running until I was 3 blocks away.
My legs ached, my lungs burned, but I didn't care.
I checked my phone. 1:37 a.m. One new message. No sender. You made the wrong choice, Nathan. I swallowed hard. Then another message. We needed him alive. I clenched my jaw. My hands were shaking. I needed answers.
I needed to know who was texting me, who was watching me.
But most of all, I needed to know who was next. Because I had a sick, horrible feeling. This wasn't over. I called my mother.
She picked up after the first ring.
You were supposed to run, she said quietly. I gritted my teeth. Yeah? Well, I didn't. Silence. Then. You need to leave town. Now. I exhaled sharply. Not happening. She sighed. Nathan. You knew, I cut her off. You knew Eric wasn't the only one. Another pause. Yes. My stomach twisted. How many? She hesitated. Then, finally, she said. More than you think. My blood ran cold. Then she whispered something that made my hands go numb. They already replaced someone else, you know. Chapter 19, Who's next? The world tilted. I gripped the nearest streetlight to steady myself. Who? I whispered. A long pause. Then she said the name. And my heart stopped. I felt sick. No, I muttered. No, you're lying. I wish I was, she said. I turned, looking down the empty street, my mind racing. If this was true. If they had already taken someone else. Then I wasn't just being hunted. I was running out of time. Chapter 20, the next one falls. I needed to be sure. I grabbed my car and drove fast. Streetlights blurred past me. My heart pounded. 15 minutes later, I pulled up to a familiar apartment complex. I ran up the stairs, 2 at a time. My hands were shaking as I knocked on the door. Silence. I knocked again. Come on, come on. The door creaked open. And there they were. Standing in the dim light, looking at me with a small, knowing smile. Like they had been waiting for me. Their voice was soft. Hey, Nathan. I froze. Because I recognized that voice. But the thing standing in front of me wasn't them anymore. And I finally understood. This was just the beginning. Chapter 21, The Eyes That Weren't Theirs. I couldn't move. The person standing in the doorway looked exactly like Ryan and my coworker, my gym partner, the guy I had known for years. But it wasn't him. His stance was too rigid. His smile was too controlled. And then there were his eyes. Not warm, not familiar. Just empty. You look like you've seen a ghost, he said casually, leaning against the doorframe. My fingers twitched toward my empty gun. Ryan, or the thing wearing Ryan's skin, tilted its head slightly. You shouldn't have run, Nathan. My stomach twisted into a knot. How long? My voice was barely a whisper. The thing inside Ryan's body grinned. Does it matter? I stepped back. My heart slammed against my ribs. I needed to get out of here. Now. Ryan took a slow step forward. Don't do that. I bolted. Chapter 22, No More Running. I tore down the hallway, my breath ragged. My feet pounded against the stairs as I took them 2 at a time, sprinting toward my car. I had no plan. No weapon. Just raw, animal fear. I reached the driver's side and yanked the door open. But before I could get inside, something grabbed my wrist. Cold. Strong. I spun around, ready to fight. But it wasn't Ryan. It was her. The woman who looked like my mother. She stared at me, eyes sharp. Get in. Her voice was different this time. No warmth. No softness. Just urgency. For a split second, I hesitated. Then I heard footsteps. Ryan, or whatever was wearing Ryan, was coming. I jumped into the car. She floored it before I even shut the door. Chapter 23, The Truth We Shouldn't Know. The city blurred past us. I gripped the dashboard, trying to steady my breathing. Ryan, I gasped. They took him. She didn't react. I turned to her. How many more? How many people have they taken? She exhaled. Too many. I shook my head. Then how do we stop them? There has to be a way.
For the first time, her expression wavered.
There is, she admitted. But you're not going to like it. I clenched my fists. Try me. She met my eyes.
You have to erase yourself.
My blood turned to ice. What?
She gripped the steering wheel tighter.
They won't stop coming for you, Nathan. They've already marked you.
The only way to survive is to disappear completely.
No records. No bank accounts. No digital footprint. You have to become someone else. Someone they'll never find. I felt sick. That's not an option, I said. There has to be another way. She didn't answer. And that's when I realized. She wasn't driving me to safety. She was driving me to the end of my life. Chapter 24, The Final Choice. We pulled up to a dark, abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. She killed the engine and turned to me. This is it, she said. If you walk inside, you can start over. You'll be safe. I stared at her. You want me to just disappear? She nodded. I looked down at my hands. At the scars, the bruises, the dirt under my nails. I had fought so hard to survive. To find the truth. And now she was telling me to give up. I shook my head. No. She frowned. Nathan. No, I repeated, firmer this time. I'm done running. If they want me, they can come for me.
But I am not erasing myself.
Her jaw tightened.
Then you won't survive, she said quietly.
I took a breath. Maybe I wouldn't.
But at least I'd go down as myself.
I opened the car door and stepped out. Into the night. Into the unknown.
But for the first time in a long time,
I wasn't afraid. Epilogue, they're still watching. It's been 3 months. I moved to a different city. I changed my name.
I thought maybe, just maybe, I had escaped.
But then, last night, I got a text. No number. No sender. Just 3 words. We remember you. And when I looked out my window, I saw Ryan. Standing across the street. Smiling. Waiting. The end? Or just the beginning?